Hi, I'm Lisa from Lori's Country Cottage. Welcome to How Tuesday. Join me today and learn how to maintain and care for your rotary cutting mat and rotary cutter. Let's start with rotary cutters and blades. Rotary cutters come in all shapes and sizes, but they have one thing in common. The blades are very sharp. And those blades stay sharp for a long time. Maintaining your blades and being careful at your cutting table can help to prolong their life even further. If you hit a pin or run into your ruler with your rotary cutter blade and you put a nick in that blade, that's the end of that blade. Every time you roll over that one nick in your blade, it will not cut the threads in your fabric and you'll have to go back and recut. So how do you prevent that from happening? Well, you train yourself to keep your cutting surface clean. I never, and I mean never, lay a pin down on my cutting surface. And I do my best not to leave pens, pencils, and spare rulers laying on my cutting surface either. That way I won't accidentally run into a pin or something else on my cutting surface. There are blade sharpeners on the market. What they will do is re-hone your blade to prolong its life. Will it take it back to its original sharpness? No, but it will prolong the life of the blade. The new endurance blades from Olfa are really fantastic. Their life is twice as long as a regular blade. So your rotary cutting blade should only be used for cutting fabric. If you cut paper, even batting and interfacings, stuff like heat and bond or Wonder Under, you will dull your blade faster. So here's a little trick that I use. This is my everyday 45mm rotary cutter. It has a charm on it, so I know that's my main cutter. When I change the blade in this cutter, I take the old blade and I put it in this cutter, and this is my paper or craft cutter. If I'm cutting cardboard or batting, I use this cutter. The blade from here, that one gets disposed of, and I keep mine in an old gum container. That's my old blades, and they get taken to the eco center when it gets full. The same holds true for my large cutter. If I'm cutting multiple layers, I use my 60mm cutter. When I change this blade, it goes into my second cutter marked paper and batting, and that's what I use to cut this. When these blades need to go to the eco station, I put them between two pieces of cardboard, I tape them shut, and I label it sharp blade, and then I take it to the eco station. Olfa also has 28mm cutters and even a crafty 18mm cutter. So I knew I was going to shoot this video, so I very purposely have not cleaned my rotary cutter for quite a while, so that there's a visible difference when I clean it. So here's how you should clean and maintain your rotary cutter. When I take my rotary cutter apart to change the blade or to clean it, I lay it out in the order that I take it apart so that I don't forget. So first there's the screw, then the washer so that it looks like the saddle, and then I allow my pieces to come apart and I lay them in that order. And my pieces are quite dirty, so all I do is wipe them with a cloth. Because I'm not cutting anything sticky with my rotary cutter, that would be my already partly dulled blade, clean cloth will get it clean. Now here comes the blade. Remember, the blade is very sharp. So I am always super careful with the blade, always only wiping in an outward motion, never in a circular motion. And then I'll just give this end piece a good wipe too. Now, when I put it back together, where the metal meets the metal of my blade, if you put a little dollop of oil, it helps to keep it lubricated. If you have put a new blade on your rotary cutter and you feel like it got dull before its time, try taking it apart and putting a drop of oil where the metal meets the metal. I think you might be surprised. Now I'm just putting my rotary cutter together in the same order I took it apart, and it is nice and clean. Same rules apply when you're changing the blade. There we go. I have a nice, clean, lubricated rotary cutter. Up next, how to care for and clean your cutting mat. Let's talk self-healing cutting mats. One of the most important things to remember with your cutting mat is that cutting mats don't like heat. Never leave it in the back seat of your car or in the trunk of your car. Never expose it to heat of any kind. Don't put a hot drink on top of it. Don't even use your laptop on top of your mat. Any kind of heat is going to warp your mat, and it's almost impossible to straighten it out again. Be very careful never to iron on your mat. To care for your rotary mat, if you do not have a dedicated sewing spot and you need to put your mat away all the time, store it flat. Underneath a bed is a good place to do it. If you store it on its side, it's bound to warp a little, and if it's exposed to heat from your heating vents, it will maintain that curve and it won't flatten out. Self-healing cutting mats are actually a series of fibers. So it's very important to use nice sharp blades with your cutting mat. If you have a dull blade, that blade is forcing the fibers between those fibers of your mat, and it will dull your blade and create grooves in your mat. Another way to care for your self-healing mat is to not do repeated cutting on the same lines. So if you use the lines on your rotary mat to cut 2 or 4 or 6 inch strips, make sure you're alternating which line you are cutting on. If you create a groove in your rotary mat, what happens is when you cut across the groove with your rotary cutter, those fibers crossing that gouge you've made do not get cut, and you need to go back and cut them again. So our rotary mats are exposed to the dyes in our fabric, the color and the dye and the printing inks from our patterns and books. We quite often use pens and pencils on top of our mats, and so they get dirty. And there are 2 different ways that you can clean your mat. If you have a smaller mat or a large bathtub, you can actually clean your mat in your bathtub or sink. Use a 1/4 cup of vinegar per gallon of water in your tub. Let it soak for 20 minutes. Put a couple drops of a very mild dish soap in the water and give it a little scrub. Take it out of the bathtub, dry it front and back, and then lay it on a towel to dry. I didn't know until I did research for this How Tuesday that rotary mats actually need to be moisturized. Who knew? Well, I'm not really interested in taking this up to my bathroom and cleaning it in my bathtub, so I'm going to use the alternate method of cleaning. I may have in the past wiped this off with a wet cloth if I made it dirty, but I have never actually cleaned this mat. So I'm going to clean mat number 1 of my tabletop mat, and we'll compare it to mat number 2. So the first thing you need to do is remove any fibers that are stuck in your mat. If you make those fibers wet first, they'll expand, just making that gouge or groove in your cutting mat wider, and you won't be able to get the fibers out. So you can either use an eraser or the mat cleaners that we sell at Lori's Country Cottage in a circular motion, and that will just lift any fibers that you have stuck in your mat, whether from minky or cuddle, cotton fibers, or batting if you've been cutting batting. Here's a little trick. If you're going to cut batting or anything quite fibrous like that on your mat, why not turn it over and use the back? So what do I need to clean my mat? Room temperature water, not hot water, not even warm, just room temperature water. A soft brush, a mushroom brush will work. Something nice and clean, no use putting dirt on dirt. Mild dish soap, I have Dawn, and a cloth. So I have wet this cloth. It's quite wet. I didn't wring it all the way out. And all the videos I watched said to either spray your mat or to wipe it with a wet cloth. Then 1 drop of dish soap, 1 drop. And then use your soft bristled brush in a circular motion to clean the mat. So I'm going to go ahead, clean my entire mat, and then come back and show you the next step. Well, my mat's clean, and boy, can I see a difference. That's enlightening and even a little embarrassing. So I simply scrubbed my mat with the soft brush, then wiped it down with the cloth. Can you see how dirty the cloth is? Absolutely incredible. Some of the information I read also suggested that you can moisturize your mat by taking a wet cloth and laying it on top and leaving it overnight, or wiping down your mat and not drying it off and allowing that moisture to soak into your mat. I'm going to go on and clean my other 2 mats so that they're the same color. Thank you for joining me for How Tuesdays at Lori's Country Cottage. Today's video was inspired by a customer request. If you have any ideas for How Tuesdays at Lori's Country Cottage, please email them to me, Lisa, at loriscountrycottage.com. Now I need to go and clean my cutting mats. Have a great day.